In this session, we will create an assembly and then we'll use it to build our first corridor. Let's take a quick tour of what we have in this file to start with. Right here, I have a surface. This represents the existing ground. It's using a border display style currently. Notice the surface is called EG. I have a sample alignment right here. This is called First Street. I used this alignment to sample a surface profile through the existing ground surface, and I have also created a finished grade profile for this alignment. We can see that I've got just an example here. I've got some fill at the beginning, and then we've got some cut down here at the end. Let's create an assembly. I'll do that by coming up to the Create Design panel. We'll open the Assembly menu, and I'll choose Create Assembly. I will give this a name. I'm going to call it Typical Section. Assembly type, let me open this up. I'll choose Undivided Crowned Road. This represents the type of road that I'm creating. If I was going to use a super elevation a little bit later, you want to make sure that the assembly type that you choose here matches the super elevation option that you pick later. So I'm going to choose Undivided Crowned Road. I'm going to keep the default styles and I'll click OK. And then I'll click to place the assembly on screen. Let me pan this over. So this is my assembly object. To add road components now to this, I'm going to select it, and then in the ribbon I'll choose Tool Palette. This brings up my palette. I'm going to add some Florida DOT lanes, so let's bring up the Florida DOT palette. I'll right click on the palette name here and I'll come down and choose FDOT subassemblies. Oh good, looks like we were already there. I apologize. As long as I went in there, let me show you that I could jump to the the stock Civil 3D content just by choosing this palette. There we go. Let me go back to FDOT. So on the Lanes tab, I'm going to choose FDOT Lane, and then this brings up my Properties palette. This is where I can change the properties of this object. We are going to be using the Properties palette frequently, so I'm going to anchor this to the interface. I'm going to right-click on this vertical bar, and I'll choose Anchor Left. That throws the palette over here to the left side of the screen. Let me do one more thing. If this is the first time that you've sent the palette over, your palette may look like this. You may have the margin there that says Properties. If you right click on that margin, you can say icons only, and that'll reduce that down to a single icon in the interface. In fact, just personal preference, I like to leave the properties palette up all the time. That way I can just come over and hit it, use it when I want to, and then move away. So now that we've done that, let's add our lane. I'll choose FDOT lane, and then I'm going to place one of these on either side. Let me go to the palette, and I'll drag down, and I can see here's the parameters for that lane. We can see that it's going to drop the first one here on the left side. So if I click this insertion point here, regardless of the side I click on, it's going to drop one there on the left. Now that I've dropped one on the left, if I click that marker again, Civil 3D says, oh, you already got one on the left, let's put one on the right as well. So I've got a symmetrical road here. Let me press escape. Just a quick thing. If you want to adjust the properties of these after the fact, you can. I can select that lane. I'll come over to the properties palette and drag down, and here you can see all of the components that we can change. Pavement depth, inside base extension, outside safety edge, the coding for these things. You can also change them multiple at one time. For instance, I'm going to select both of these lanes and we'll change the pavement thicknesses. Pavement 1 depth is 1.5 inches. Pavement 2 depth, we'll make that 1.5. As I press enter, you can see how that updates on screen. It's parametric, really. Let's change this to base depth of 6 inches and sub base depth of 4. Maybe that's what I want to go with for my design. I can even change the lane width here. I mean, we could make that 5. You can see how quickly that changes. Now, at the risk of destroying the end of the presentation here, once I build my corridor from this typical section or from this assembly, this is how I'm going to drive the geometry. These assemblies are what drive the shape of the corridor model. So I can come over here and change properties to update that model. Let me press escape, and I'm going to add some curb and gutter. We'll go to the curb and gutter tab. I'll come down here and choose FDOT type F curb. And then to attach a new object, I don't have to worry about right or left at this point. At this point, Civil 3D is right and left aware. All I have to do is grab that ring to snap a curb and gutter on that side. I'm still in the command. We'll take and snap one on that side. Let me press escape. Just for a second, we'll grab the curb and gutter, and then I will open this up. We'll come down and take a look at some of the properties that we have. Okay, based on the type of object that it is, you can see that all the options we have here are with respect to curb. Interesting one here, curb type. I chose type F curb. Let me zoom in a little bit. I chose type F, but this subassembly component also has the ability to flip to a different type of curb if I want to. Let's take a look at type E. Let's go back to type F. So let me show you one more thing, very helpful. Whenever you're selecting components, if you wonder, geez, I'd like a little bit more information on this. How is this set up? If you right click on these, you can come down and choose help. This will bring up the help documentation, tell you everything you want to know about the objects. So I can see the insertion points, I can see the name, I can see the shape names here. Let me pull this down a little bit. We can see the input parameters. So these are the options that we see on the properties palette, so we know what we have control over. Target parameter, can we use this to target an alignment or profile or surface? In this case, there are no targets for this object. We'll talk about targeting as we progress here. Output parameters, can we adjust the slopes to match other objects in the assembly? Let's pull this down a little bit further. We can see the measurements. And if we go down to the bottom, usually there's a coding diagram. So here we can see, just like we talked about earlier, we can see the names of the point codes. So these will be the names of the feature lines. Here's the codes that are assigned to the links, and we can see the codes that are assigned to the shapes. This is synonymous with all of the content. So if I go to lanes here for just a second, we'll choose help. We can drag this one down. This particular lane will target an outside. The outside edge of the lane can target a horizontal target to control the width, and a profile to control the elevation if we want to. Let's take this down a little bit further, and you can see that same type of schematic giving us the codes for the points, links, and shapes. Okay, let's close this. Let's do one more thing. If you have any questions about the way the content is set up, at least for the Florida DOT content, let me go to my Florida DOT tab. From here, I'm going to choose links and contacts. This will bring up a nice dialog box, and you can drag this down. If you have any questions, there are representatives here from FDOT that will help answer your questions. So I've asked a few questions myself. You can see we've got contact info where you can give them a call or send them an email, and I've gotten a fantastic response. So if you have any questions about the content, that's one thing you can do. All right, so we've got our 2 lanes and we've got some curb and gutter here. Let's build a corridor from this. To build my corridor, I'm going to go to the Home tab, and then I'm going to open the corridor menu. We'll call this corridor, I think it was called First Street was the name of the alignment, so we'll be consistent here, and we'll call the corridor First Street. Then we'll come down, and the 3 components needed to build a corridor are horizontal alignment, profile, and assembly. So let's pick those 3 components now. First Street alignment, and then I want to use the First Street finished grade profile, and then I want to use my typical section assembly. I'm not targeting any surfaces, that's fine. This checkbox, set baseline and region parameters, what that really means is, do you want to see a dialog box? In this case, no, I don't want to see the dialog box. Let me just go ahead and click OK. We'll back up and come over here, and you can see the corridor model that we created. Okay, just for a second, let's take a look at this in 3D. I'm going to select the corridor, and then I will come up and choose Object Viewer. Let's orbit this up. I'm just holding the left mouse button to orbit this. When you're using the Object Viewer, it's good to keep your cursor in the middle of the screen and make small increments. Because there's actually an interface item here that's not being displayed. If you get to it's a circle, and if you get outside that circle, then it locks the axis, and you can see right there that may cause some confusion if you're just brand new to this. So if you keep the cursor in the middle, it makes things much easier. So as I zoom in on this, you can see there's no real magic to the corridor. It's just taking that assembly and it's copying it along the 3-dimensional linear object that represents our horizontal and vertical design. So we can see the assembly copied along there, and here's all those longitudinal lines, all those dots being connected. Let me close this. I'll press escape. Let's zoom in, and we'll hover over some of these lines. Flow line gutter, it's a feature line. This one here, face a curb, back a curb. So let me back up. As the assembly is copied along the design. You can see they're straight line connections. When we get into an area of a curve like this, you can see it doesn't look very round. We're restricted by how often the assembly has been inserted around the bend here. So this is called frequency. If I want to have a smoother arc here, I need to increase the frequency of the insertions of the assembly in the rounded areas. Let's look at how we can do that. I'm going to adjust the corridor properties. I'll select my corridor. I'll come up and choose corridor properties. And then in the corridor properties dialog box, I'm going to go to the parameters tab. And this is the control center for the entire corridor. We can do everything here. And just like with AutoCAD and Civil 3D, you can make adjustments in many places. So there's other places to adjust your corridor, but you can do everything here. So this is a one-stop shop for everything. Let me pull this down. We can see our corridor. Let me click right here. This represents our baseline. I can see the baseline is defined by the alignment and profile. And then inside this baseline, I've got a region. When I click that, you can see how that highlights. The region shows you the area where the assembly is copied. Okay, so that's what we're seeing here. Let me drag this up. For right now, I want to adjust frequencies. I'm going to come down and click the Set All Frequencies button. And this is where I can adjust how often that assembly is inserted along the design. And I can control it along tangents, straight segments, or along curves. If we do it along curves, by default it's set to add an increment, so maybe I could set this to every 10 feet. I want one of these placed around a curve. Note that if I wanted to, I could also place these based on curvature. This is a new item in 2015. This allows me to set a mid-ordinate distance. And the smaller I set that distance, the tighter it's going to be around the curves. And this helps if you've got curves of large and small radiuses. So the tighter the radius, the more insertions you would have. For right now, we're just going to go with increment, and then I can also tighten up the insertions along spirals. Note that we can do this in the profile as well. So if there's a vertical curve, we can tighten this up. We'll do that too. And then if I'm using any targets, I can increase the assembly insertions there. For right now, I'm going to come down and click OK. I'll click OK. So we increased the frequency. I'll click Rebuild the Corridor, and we can see that change on screen. Let me press Escape. Let's make an adjustment. I'm going to add some content to this now. Let's go to the Urban tab. I'm going to add a sidewalk. Let's snap this to the outside ring. Let's snap this to the outside ring. So I've got one on either side. I will then adjust the properties. We'll select both of these, and I'll come over to the properties palette. We'll take a look here. Looks like I've got ground link inside is 3 feet. Maybe we'll set that to 5 just for this example. And the ground link outside is 2 feet. Maybe we'll just make that 1 for right now. So you can see now I'm at 5 feet and 1 foot. Let's rebuild the corridor. Now that I've made changes to the assembly, let's update the model. I'll select the corridor, and then I'll just come up and click Rebuild. And you can see that's now updated. Let's zoom in. So I've got some new feature lines. This one represents sidewalk in and sidewalk out. Just for a second, let's take a look at this in the section editor. Just another way we can view our design. I'm going to select the corridor, and then from the ribbon I'll come up and choose Section Editor. From here, now we can see I've got a bunch of interface items here. Let me mention that when this comes up, you may think that you're going into a separate editor. We are not. Our UCS is actually snapping to the very first assembly insertion in the corridor. We can see that we're at station 0 right here. If I open this menu in the middle, I can jump to every assembly insertion along this corridor model. All right, so we are actually seeing the real corridor right here. Let me take this back to the beginning. So I can use my button right here to step through this. Okay, forward and backward. Let's do something. One thing I like to do when I'm in the editor, just to show you that you can do it. This grid, as you zoom in, the squares will keep resizing. Let me do this. I'm going to go to right down here, View Edit Options. Adaptive grid. There we go. I'm going to turn that off. This is personal preference. And let me change the color of these. I like these to not stand out so much. So I'm turning the adaptive grid off. And I'm going to change these grid lines to black. That way they don't stand out so much. And we'll change the text color here to a medium gray. Let me click OK. There we go. That looks a little bit better. You'll find that future exercise files have this same setting. So I can step through my design. I can see here's where I'm in the area of fill. As I step along, eventually I'll come back down and then I start heading into my area of cut based on my profile. Let's zoom in a little further and we'll pan this over. Maybe as I'm stepping through the design, I'm interested in a specific area. Each time I step, I can zoom in and look at this, but when I step to the next one, it's going to kind of do a zoom extents. That's because of this button right here. Let me zoom in. If I open this up, I can say zoom to an offset and elevation, and it'll kind of lock this view on screen. So now as I step through, it'll keep me focused in that area. Okay. So the section editor is just another way that we can view our geometry. Let me close this. I'll zoom out and we will center this on screen. In the next session, we'll look at how we can assign surfaces to the corridor model.